Welcome to the third of the ReVeAL June webinar series. This one's on UVAR governance and finance. I'm Lucy Sadler, and you may know me from urbanaccessregulations.eu or many other access regulations things. The ReVeAL Horizon 2020 project works on urban vehicle access regulations, which include low emission zones, zero emission zones, traffic limited zones, charging schemes, and spatial interventions. Spatial interventions is where the road space is given from vehicles to other users, or the road layer altered. They're not always defined as UVARs, but they can be used to either complement or as alternatives for traditional UVARs. ReVeAL is supporting 6 pilot cities in developing good practice UVARs. Through this, we will be developing and validating a toolkit to help other cities develop good practice UVARs. Part of this toolkit is a series of guidance documents covering different aspects of UVARs. And these 4 themes are also the topic of the webinars. We've got Maria Jose from Polis who will explain the topic. Limrod Levy from Jerusalem will give some insight into which communication measures work best. And Juan Carlos from Vitoria Gasteiz will explain how the SUMP process is used together with UVARs and tell us how it's helped Vitoria Gasteiz to develop their amazingly highly pedestrianised city. In terms of webinar housekeeping, we are recording the session, and the recording, presentations and Q&A will be available on our website, and we'll email you with that link. Please put your questions in the chat, and we'll answer those after the presentation, or some of them maybe text. And any questions we don't manage today, we'll respond to upload on the website. So we're going, no more delay, to Maria Jose and introduce the topic.
Great. Thank you very much, Lucy, for the introduction. And thank you everyone for joining this webinar. So as Lucy explained, we are going to look today at the topics and the aspects related to governance and financing that can help to develop successful UVARs. So indeed, so this is it's the third webinar related to these cross-cutting issues. We had already the one on ensuring compliance and on user needs and acceptance. And next week, we will have the one on mobility concepts, the supporting mobility measures. So you're most welcome to join also the webinar next week, Tuesdays as always. And so, well, the definition we have used within ReVeAL is the one provided by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which defines governance as the exercise of political, economic, and administrative authority necessary to manage a nation's affairs. So questions linked to governance include who has a voice in the decision process, how are the decisions made, who is accountable once a decision has been made. And another key notion is good governance, which is characterized by participation, transparency, accountability, rule of law, effectiveness, and equity. And for ReVeAL, a good governance implies transparent procedures for project management, procurement, financial management, and allocation of revenues at the local level. In many cases, policy and operational coordination is needed between different levels of government affected by the UVAR. So at its best, effective governance translates into project management of UVAR scheme with accompanying measures, long and short term, institutionally anchored by means of a specific agency or different agencies working together or through the establishment of a public-private partnership. So some of the key aspects which fall under this topic are the legal, the decision-making context, the legal frameworks, the institutional setting and organizational arrangements, local policy frameworks and planning instruments, and political instruments. So financing refers to the way UVAR measures are funded and how any resulting revenue streams are used. And within the ReVeAL context, financial allocation must be linked to transparency. So clarity about how revenue streams from UVAR, from fines or fee collection are spent can improve the acceptance. However, UVARs are rarely net money makers. Generally, the city wants to achieve compliance rather than collecting fines. And some key aspects under this topic are the funding of the establishment of an UVAR, the management of in-kind contributions of institutional partners, procurement, purpose and management of revenue streams. So regarding the decision-making context, understanding this context is a key step. So when assessing these, some of the key issues that need to be identified are who makes UVAR-related decisions, so identify the leading politicians in the UVAR process, who formulates technical solutions, to identify the leading technicians within the city and also leading external or contracted technicians in the UVAR project, who are the leading voices and organizations that affect the UVAR project, both supportive and opposing, and if there is an UVAR champion leading this process. It is crucial to identify from the early stages if national frameworks are in place for the implementation and efficient enforcement of the selected UVAR, for example, for automatic number plate recognition, camera enforcement, for sending fines, identifying complying vehicles, etc., as well as for its financial management, personal data protection, tendering, and procurement. So it is important to know if new regulations are needed to implement the UVAR and whether a new or altered national legislation is needed. There are often different ways to implement a given scheme, so it's important to identify the most appropriate way for local context. So, for example, many low emission zones use a ban for non-compliant vehicles with a fine for non-compliance, for example, in Berlin, and others, such as the London low emission zone, uses a charging legislation with a high fee for non-compliant vehicles, which could also be seen as a fine or a daily exemption permit. So it might be difficult to determine how an UVAR can be implemented within the existing legal frameworks, and innovation sometimes is needed, using existing legislation for slightly different purpose or trial schemes or voluntary compliance, facilitating new legislation, etc. So within ReVeAL, Jerusalem worked to update the local and national legal frameworks to allow for its low emission zone. There is also an advantage to have more than one scheme of or one type in the same country or region, because this leads to bigger acceptance. For example, in the northern of Italy and in Germany, there's a common approach that has been taken for the legal frameworks to ease communication and understanding. So it's also helpful to identify policies that will be relevant to the planned UVAR. This can address topics which are very varied, and you can see here, such as air quality, congestion, accessibility and climate, land use, public transport, parking, cycling, innovation, and others. Many cities have policies covering these areas, but it's important to ensure that the objectives of the UVAR align with other policy objectives the city has, and that there is a process to align these policies. So for a high impact or controversial UVAR, it helps to work within the framework of an integrated long-term plan, such as a SUMP, and the integration of SUMP and UVAR ensures that UVAR is integrated and supported by a comprehensive mobility strategy. And it can also offer a structure of existing stakeholder groups or communication procedures, which can support as well the UVAR implementation process. And here, well, there's a the SUMP topic guide, including one in UVARs that can help to support the UVAR. And an example of good practice in the integration of UVAR mobility plan is provided by the ReVeAL City Vitoria Gasteiz, and you will very soon be able to hear more about this success story. There, the Superblock scheme was used in their SUMP as the main tool to achieve the objectives for the city. but also other cities. Ghent, for example, the circulation plan is another good example, as it was developed as a chapter of the mobility plan to highlight its development as an integrated measure that was part of the overall strategic vision of the city. Well, regarding instruments, political instruments, there are different processes and events that may have an important impact on the UVAR process. For example, elections, political party agreements, etc. And at the same time, there are a variety of political instruments which can be used to identify different moments of the UVAR lifetime and to support the UVAR process. So periodic monitoring reports are key for the necessary assessment of UVAR measures and confirming appropriate support for the implementation or changing them if needed. And here there's an image, it reflects a bit how we work with our ReVeAL transition framework, where we try to capture the key events in the process of design and implementation of UVARs. It's regarding the electoral cycle, it's important to have it in mind, including elections, the beginning of a campaign, etc., and to foresee if the UVAR will be implemented within this electoral period of the ones that are deciding the scheme. So the greatest resistance to a scheme generally arises around the implementation. So there is a significant advantage of the scheme being implemented at least a year before the end of the legislative period, so that the improvements can be acknowledged before the next election. The way UVAR measures are funded and the revenue streams used is an important consideration, and several aspects of the UVAR may need to have funding identified, including the plan or study, the installation of the equipment, communication of the measure and public involvement, enforcement and monitoring and review. So regarding the establishment of an UVAR, upfront financing of the UVAR scheme might be a challenge for UVAR implementers, but there are a number of financing instruments and options which can be considered. There is also a number of options for public-private partnerships, for infrastructure or system procurement, and we have different also sources like the SPICE, the Smart Procurement for Better Transport project and its best practices, which are relevant for financing and procuring ITS systems. And also the Some Funding and Finance Guide is a good resource as well in this regard, and others that are mentioned in the guidance document, which you can take a look for more details. Management of in-kind contribution of institutional partners includes such things as the UVAR authority working with other road authorities to, for example, announce the zone, to place the equipment, or to source power for the equipment. And it could also include common promotion of a measure. All of these requires acceptance and approval and could create challenges if not taken up willingly by the other public stakeholders. So the UVAR procurement procedures need to be transparent as well. The authority may already have guidelines for many of these aspects, which help to ensure this is a transparent process. And the considerations for external procurement include planning and preparation of the procurement procedures, definition of specifications and standards, selection of tenders, valuation of tenders, and implementation and management of the contract. And once the UVAR measure is in operation, transparency about how the revenues streams are spent helps to improve public acceptance. These revenues must also be administered properly, and idea also be earmarked for transport improvements, the best cases. And communications play a key role in all of our phases. There are different aspects of communication involving different and overlapping groups. So one participation in UVAR development involves interest groups, stakeholder events. Then the public consultation, which is a large two-way flow of information and feedback. Communication within the authority plus with different levels of the government, and disseminating information on the scheme once it's confirmed using different variety of methods. And finally, also setting up queries and complaints systems. So regarding participation in the initial development phases, two-way dialogue with different stakeholders is important to understand their needs and concerns. Several different rounds of this may be needed through the development of the UVAR, and the last round might take the shape of a formal public consultation, which is sometimes also a legally required step. Aspects related to participation were actually dealt in within the previous webinar, user needs and acceptance, which you can take a look because it's already in the website. And a good example of participation within ReVeAL is Bielefeld's process, which was presented in this webinar I was mentioning. So also important is communication within the authority with the different departments, so the planning, traffic, climate, environment, the IT department, economy, qualities, and also the different levels of government, so national, regional, neighboring, also governments, and vehicle database authorities, etc. So this is important to get an integrated scheme that functions well as part of the whole city organism. And finally, once the scheme is confirmed, communication campaigns and processes are instrumental to spread the word and efficiently communicate the UVAR requirements to citizens and a wide array of stakeholders. And a great example that we will see today is Jerusalem's communication campaign. It's called Avernaki, Clean Jerusalem from Air Pollution. So we will have a lot of details about how they dealt with this communication process. Once the scheme is in operation, as mentioned before, it's also advisable to have a transparent query and complaint system for when vehicle operators feel unjustly treated or wish to dispute a fine, etc. And at all stages, relying on the local press or other leading voices alone to convey scheme information may not give accurate facts, and appropriate information needs to be made available by the authority. So as mentioned, you can have more detailed information about these aspects and also about the other aspects we are dealing with within the project in our website. The link is here to all the documents, and feel free to subscribe to our newsletter, to visit our website, and to follow us in social media. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the discussion later.
Many thanks, Maria Jose, for that good introduction. I'll add in one of the things also in terms of spreading the news once you've decided about an UVAR is making the UVAR information digital. And there is an EU project we're also linked with UVAR Box to help support cities in that digitization process. And I'll put the link onto the chat. Now we fly down from Brussels to Jerusalem, and Nimrod Levy will show us, explain about their communication campaign, which is really great. Which all cities did this campaign like you did, Nimrod? Okay, we'll see you after the.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. My name is Nimrod Levy. Thank you, Maria Jose, for telling us that communication is so important. It plays a major role in the process of UVAR and low emission zone. I am the Environmental Engineering Department Manager in Jerusalem Municipality. I will talk about our publicity campaigns in regard to low emission zone project in Jerusalem. The goals behind the campaigns were increasing the public's knowledge, understanding, and awareness about air quality, and mobilize the diverse population groups in our complex city to support the low emission zones initiative. This is in a situation where air quality is not considered to be the major problem in our city and not a top priority issue. So increasing the awareness was the main goals. The concept behind the campaigns based on polluting vehicles that vanish into air bubbles upon entering Jerusalem. The visual image of air bubbles conveys cleanliness, clarity, and transparency. Let's see the example in Hebrew. It was saying that we clean the air of Jerusalem from air pollution. The campaigns were divided to two phases, and the phase one was introducing the project and its possible impacts. The media distribution plan was involved in many kinds of media routes, like billboards, buses, radio, print, social media, digital, and TV, with a total budget of about 800,000 euro. You can see here examples from print media in all kinds of languages that we can find in Jerusalem: Hebrew, Russian, English, Arabic, of course. Digital and social media, again, the same example of the bubbles and the polluted vehicles that disappeared through the low emission zone initiative. Content articles was also part of it. Again, with all kinds of languages being found in Jerusalem. Billboards and sign on buses. Again, cleaning the air of Jerusalem from air pollution. This was the main sentence. 4 TV channels were involved. You can see the number of broadcasts, and 10 radio channels were involved by advertisements and interviews. And the campaign was followed with survey. And one of the questions was, are you aware of the program of the Ministry of Environment Protection and the Jerusalem municipality to prohibit the entry of polluting vehicles into Jerusalem? The campaign has greatly increased awareness of the program. You can see that after the campaign, the first phase, there is a great increase in the awareness of the people, and they got to know the program. The phase two was based on extending awareness with banners and posters. You can see example of a sign, a road sign in Arabic. Again, the second phase, newspaper, all kinds of newspaper were involved. Again, many signs in the side of the roads. And we also sent letters to the owners of polluted vehicles, all the owners of polluted vehicles in Israel. The letters you can see in Arabic and in Hebrew. saying that the restriction is going to start in January 2020. Pay attention, take care, get ready to it. We also made a ways exposure where during the campaign, every driver that entered Jerusalem got a notice saying in Jerusalem there is no entrance to polluted vehicle. The second phase was also followed with a survey, and you can see that after the campaign, the blue column, there is a lot more people that say that the initiative is important to them, and less people are saying that the initiative is not important for them. The survey and conclusion: awareness level at the beginning of the second campaign was high, 34%, showing that the public remembrance of the first campaign was high. Awareness during the second campaign was very high, 68.6, showing that the campaign goal achieved. 40% applied that they wouldn't be affected by the limitation, shows understanding regarding the actual effect of the project, which means that it deals just with polluted vehicles, and importance level increased from 4.7 to 46.4%. I must also say that all these campaigns and all the process and the program in general is very much due to a deep cooperation between Jerusalem municipality, which its sign you can see in the upper left side, and the Ministry of Environmental Protection in Israel, which its sign you can see in the right, in the upper right side, and of course with very much involvement and help and guidance with the crew, the team of ReVeAL, which is very much involved and influence all we're doing here in Jerusalem. Thank you.
So, many thanks for that. I've lost my buttons to show myself again. And we'll go over, we're going back up north to Spain and show you the presentation from Juan Carlos. And unfortunately, somehow, his presentation had problems showing from him. So I am showing his presentation, hopefully.
Hi, thank you, Lucy, for your support, and welcome everybody. Thank you very much for this opportunity to participate in this seminar, and for providing us this chance, to show a clear example on how relevant policies and planning instruments are being applied to this UVAR concept that is the main issue of the ReVeAL project.
Sorry, I'm being completely awful and wasn't prepared. I had it prepared and it somehow decided it wasn't going to take off where I'd left it prepared. Now you're there. Sorry,
That's
I left
perfect.
it prepared and then, yeah, anyway. Yep.
Thank you very much. Okay. Well, please, next slide. Let's go with a brief introduction to the city of Vitoria Gasteiz. Yes, Vitoria is a 250,000 city that is located in the north of Spain. It's the capital of the Basque Country. And as you can see, it's a very compact city. We have around 250,000 of inhabitants, but 98% of the residents of the city of the municipality of Vitoria Gasteiz are living inside the 3 kilometers radius from the city center. So it's really compact and a real city where everything is accessible, walking or cycling. Next slide, please. Well, the first vehicle restrictions in the city were applied very early in the late 70s with the arrival of the democracy, when this first mayor decided to start working in a huge pedestrianization in the city center. And for the year 1993, more or less around 40,000 square meters of pedestrian areas were deployed in the across the city. Next slide. In any case, even such a pioneer commitment toward a human-scale city, it was not until the year 26 when the city started working in order to have an integrated approach in the mobility and public space policies. And it was when we started working in a SAMP. In our case, it's a sustainable mobility and public space plan. And it was decided to start it work from the very beginning, trying to include as much as stakeholders as possible, including the political, the technical, and the citizen view. No? For the year 27, we have this shared vision that is the Citizens Pact for Sustainable Mobility, that was really very important in order to support many of the unpopular measures that we're going to implement it in the coming years. Next slide. Well, in our case, the main element, as Maria Jose has introduced briefly at the beginning of the session, has been supported by the concept of a superblock. The superblock is a geographical area delimited by main streets covering several city blocks. And according to this concept, the idea is to establish a new hierarchy of streets according to their volumes of traffic, and by separating the crossing roads from the ones just covered by the local traffic. No? One of the objectives of the superblock concept is, in fact, to reduce the traffic inside the superblock. That is one of the main issues behind our ReVeAL project. This way, new pedestrian areas appear in the inner of the superblock, and new areas for pedestrians, cyclists, for service and emergency vehicles, resident and free distribution, with speed limits to ensure a peaceful coexistence of citizens. So this approach provides us a real opportunity to become a human scale city. And this is clearly supported by the disruption of the crossing traffic flows through the superblock, what is the issue behind our project. Next slide. Well, here you have one of the first examples of the implementation that was the pilot superblock in Sancho El Sabio Street. That was one of the main corridors for the entrance traffic into the city center of the city. And according to this new approach, it was transformed in a really different street, more focused to the socialization than to the traffic and to the mobility. Next slide. Well, as I stated before, the city started very early with supporting measures in order to avoid the traffic inside the city center, like the pedestrianizations and the on-street parking regulated area. But when we started with a new SAMP, together with the implementation of a new public transport network, it was decided to establish a new parking policy, extending the regulated area around 30% with new areas, and increasing the price for parking in the city center by 3. The price. In an attempt to discourage the use of the private car to go into the city center. Next slide. In this framework, it was decided to establish an access control system to prevent vehicles from entering the pedestrian streets in the city center to the south of the medieval quarter. And cameras were installed to register the number plates at the entry and exit of the area, working by pairs. The system of cameras works reading the number plates of all vehicles entering and leaving the city center, and using the time. No? The idea is if the vehicle entered in the restricted area takes less than a certain time to exit the regulated area, the system automatically considers it is a passing through vehicle, and therefore the driver is fine. Otherwise, the vehicle is identified as a resident or as a goods distribution vehicle, and so it has the permission to circulate within the zone. Next slide. Well, the main objective was to try to avoid this through traffic into the city center, trying to avoid using the traditional automatic bollards previously used in the city, because we have some problems with managing such devices. So it was decided to implement such a system, also in order to improve the air quality and the quality of the public space in the city center. Next slide. It was needed to establish an important information campaign in order to engage the community and to explain carefully the objectives and the background behind the decision. And this way we establish different signaling, warning the drivers that they were going into an area monitored by video cameras. We we create a specific website, different informative posters were put in all the garages in the area, and in a similar way than in Jerusalem, we prepared a personalized letter to the drivers, but not to all the drivers of the city, only to all those drivers circulating in the area during this communication campaign. So we put the signals, and we register all the through traffic going into the city center, and automatically we send letters informing the drivers that the system was operating, and that in a near future the fines will be put in practice, and trying to engage them not to do it in the future. We established also some additional supporting elements like a telephone service. We did different meetings with some schools in the area, and also all of was supported by a specific communication campaign and a press conference that was established in order to guarantee the success of such a measure. Next slide. Yes, there were different barriers, but also drivers. Fortunately, among the drivers, we would like to highlight in this political, technical, and citizen consensus that was obtained at the beginning of the Sustainable Mobility and Public Space implementation with this Citizens Pact. That was really important in order to confront the initial opposition to this kind of measures. And from the financial point of view, it was really important to have the support from the CIVITAS program, because we were participating in a specific project funded by the CIVITAS program. But to highlight some barriers, maybe the main one was the political agenda dealing with the local elections, because when it was started to implement the measure, we were just in front of the local elections, and it was decided to postpone the operating of all the system until the new government being established. Next slide. Well, here you have some figures after the implementation, not only of this measure, but after the implementation of a set of different measures that are included in the Sustainable Mobility and Public Space Plan. Yes, because we consider that it's interesting to think in all these measures as part of a system, and the reality is that it was possible to reduce in an important figure the number of cars going through the city center. We have increased the figures for active mobility, or even for transport, for the public transport. And I consider that behind these figures are both measures that were implemented at this moment, like it's the extension of the parking regulated area, increasing the prices for parking, and also the UVAR that was established with the cameras across the area. Next slide. Well, in any case, what is clear that we have a lot of work to be done. We are nowadays with the update of the Sustainable Mobility and Public Space Plan, with some ideas to extend the parking, the on-street parking regulated area to more super blocks surrounding the central ones. And also recently, the national government has adopted a new climate change law that establishes as mandatory for all cities to implement zero emission zones. And that's because nowadays our challenge is how to upgrade, how to improve the UVAR scheme we implemented 10 years ago according to those new challenges. Next slide. But not only working on the city center, because according to the superblock scheme, we are trying to extend this kind of formulation, trying to give the public space back to the people and also to the nature. And that is because we are working, next slide, trying to extend the superblock approach to some neighborhoods, for instance, to these new neighborhoods located to the west part of the city, where it will be really interesting to try to work together with the community and with the different stakeholders in order to convince them about how to proceed properly in order to establish the access regulations across many of the inner streets in those super blocks. And that is because we are starting now working together with the community in order to convince and in order to improve the final designs for these new areas that will be recovered for nature and for the people. Next slide, and I think is the last one. Okay, that's all. So now it's the turn to the question and answers part of the session, doesn't it, Lucy?
That's right. Many thanks for that, Juan Carlos. And if I can ask Bonnie to take the presentation away from me, so I stop sharing and ask Nimrod and Maria Jose to come back onto the stage. Don't know if that will work. Okay, Bonnie hasn't. I can stop sharing myself. Right. Many thanks for all of that. It's useful to see how some process can help make the UVAR combined into the whole work that the city's doing to make sure it's not isolated and not seen as isolated, and that everything else can help fit in with it, together with the mobility options so that people can get into the area. Mobility options is what we'll be talking about next week. Whilst you're thinking about your questions, one thing I found very interesting about the Jerusalem case was they did some assessment of which of the communication mechanisms was most effective, and some of those were surprising. At that stage, the ways it that they talked about is a type of sat nav, a Google sat nav, and they haven't yet done the digitization to go into sat navs that we're trying to get into process in Europe. But I thought if Nimrod could tell us a bit about what he found there.
Well, I'm sorry that I don't have more slides available now, but in regards to what media was the most effective, it is surely the TV media, but it also connected to the coronavirus pandemic and the situation where a lot of people were staying at home and saw the TV from morning to evening. And we also found that billboard, which is a old-fashioned kind of media, was also very effective. We have the data. If someone wants more details about it, I can send it later.
Okay. In terms of governance and finance, we have the guidances. We have a series of guidances documents on all of the cross-cutting themes. So on all of them, there is more information. I will put the link in the chat. So please do have a look at those. I don't know, is there anything else anybody would like to reflect on today on what you've heard from the other speakers?
Well, maybe I can ask to Juan Carlos, because you had all these information of monitoring of the model shift, sorry, the model split and how it has evolved. Do you already have some insights about how the pandemic has influenced in this model split, or?
Not yet, unfortunately, only for Vice Call, because we have no real-time information being recorded regarding the different modes operating in the area. We have also the data from the public transport users, and we have some information coming from private operators, for instance, from TomTom or something like that, showing us how is the evolution of the traffic in comparison with the previous time. And but we lack of this holistic view on what is the situation now. Nowadays, the Basque government is updating the mobility survey for the whole autonomous community, for the whole Basque country, and I know they are using data coming from phone operators in order to try to establish this kind of information. But it's really a pity, yes, because all of us, we are really concerned about what could be the impact of the pandemic in the mobility system after this so huge effort for years trying to get people into the public transport and trying to convince people to do carpooling and so on. But who knows? Let's see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
It's something very interesting that the traffic management as a service is increasingly the technologies that can be used now. And if there's programs to help support that, and if I can find it in time, I'll put that in the chat. There's a question from Leo Huberts in the chat. It says, how do you deal with non-resident drivers? Did you communicate outside the city limits? We'll go first to Jerusalem, I think. Nimrod. So how did you communicate with residents outside the city limits?
Well, Israel is a very small country, and the blacklist of polluted vehicles is something that we judge all over the country. Our borders are closed. We don't have shift from neighboring country. We're sorry about it, unfortunately. And so the pool is known, and the program in Jerusalem influenced all the drivers, all the polluted vehicle drivers in Israel. If this answers the question.
Yeah, you've had quite a lot of support from the national government as well.
Yes.
And there is a parallel regulation which all large firms are required to have certain standards. So there's communication at the national level as well. The letters you sent out, did they go to just Israeli? Did they go to all Israeli vehicle holders or just those in Jerusalem?
No, to all the Israeli drivers.
So those letters that went out, they went to all drivers, so that was communicating those that needed to know more directly.
All the Israeli drivers know, and the letter that I just mentioned before was sent to all the polluted vehicles, drivers, owners in all Israel, not just in Jerusalem.
Yeah. Juan Carlos, how did you communicate with those outside city limits?
Well, no, in our case, it's easier to be managed because, as I introduced briefly at the beginning of my presentation, our city is very special from the mobility point of view because we have no metropolitan area and mainly our traffic is local traffic. So we are also a medium-sized city where it's really easy to communicate the whole city using different ways, and that is because we did a specific campaign trying to use different media in order to communicate the implementation of this new measure. And we prepare a specific campaign devote focus in 3 elements. We sent a communication kit to all the residents living in the area in order to communicate them that they were not affected, that they will be able to continue going with the car to their garages. We did another specific campaign focused into the shop owners and the businesses established in the area. Also, trying to communicate that it will be needed to change in some way their operating issues. And the third one was the specific letter that we were sending to all the drivers going into the limited area, doing a through way, communicating them that the system were detecting them and that in the near future they would be fine. This way, it was possible to check day by day how the figures of drivers going in a wrong way into the area was more or less easy to manage. It was when finally the system started to send the fines. And yes, the campaign was running for more or less 2-3 months, and it was really successful in comparing the previous with the last figures.
Yeah. One thing as well, I know Jerusalem has, and I think also many other cities have road signs, of course, right as you go into the area. And working with for all cities looking, I cannot encourage you strongly enough to get involved with the UVAR box project, because it's more and more important that people know about these schemes in their sat navs, and the way to do that is with the standardized way of expressing your UVAR to go by machine readable into the sat navs. We have another question. What happens when the Belgian tourist enters your beautiful city with his old camper van, Juan Carlos?
There is no problem because we will have specific parkings located in the city border, in the urban city border. So no problem for them. They don't need to go into the city center with the van.
Yeah, And it's the idea is also with the congestion charting, freedom of all means often freedom for nobody or freedom for everybody to sit in a traffic jam, or you go to a beautiful city to see it and it's full with vehicles so you can't see and enjoy it. So
in any case, they have always the chance to walk from this parking into the city center, because it's not more than 30 minutes walking across very marvelous streets and promenades.
Yeah, it's wonderful the pictures you show from Vitoria Gasteiz. I hope when Corona's finished, we can actually come and visit you in a consortium meeting, and everybody else visiting as tourists. We've run out of time now. Many thanks to everybody for joining. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you enjoyed this, you might enjoy the last webinar, which is next Tuesday, same time, same place. It's on mobility, making sure that people can still access the areas, even maybe not in the mobility mode of their choice. We'd love to know how we did, so please do fill out the survey that we email you to afterwards. Or Bonnie, our wonderful woman in the background, will do that. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. And also, I'm being really good, Alessia, and telling everybody about the social media. So follow us on social media. It's not really my thing, but I'm getting better at it. And also, please don't forget to look at the guidances. They give more details on the topics we're showing, as well as the webinar recordings and presentations that are on our website. So many thanks for coming, and hope to see you next week.